depending who you talk to, they're either really panicky now, so they're past the stages of grieving, they're on full-on acceptance, and then other industries, they're still full-on in denial.
Welcome to Shielded, the last line of cyber defense by PQ Shield, the podcast where we are moving the conversation around post-quantum cryptography from the why to the how. I'm Jo Lintzen, your host, and I'm here to guide you through the challenges, innovations, and solutions that will help your organization stay secure in the quantum era. Let's future-proof your defenses together. Welcome back to Shielded, the last line of cyber defense, the podcast where we navigate the rapidly evolving world of post-quantum cryptography. Be sure to follow so you don't miss an episode. I'm your host, Jo Lintzen, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by an expert at the forefront of PQC adoption, Kevin Hilscher, Senior Director of Product Management at DigiCert. He joins to discuss key topics like the practicalities of PQC adoption, the unique challenges of hybrid cryptography, and how businesses can prepare for the quantum era, from regulatory considerations to vendor readiness. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, before we started with the recording, we were chatting a little bit about Calgary and your proximity to, Banff National Park, and of course the big circus that comes to town with the big rodeo, the Stampede. Do you want to share a few, stories from either Banff National Park or visiting the Stampede?
Yeah. The Calgary Stampede is known worldwide. We had over 1 million visitors, 1.5 million visitors. I think we had a record this year. Here in July, the whole city basically rallies around it. Everyone's wearing cowboy hats, cowboy boots. There's free pancake breakfasts everywhere. Planes, fighters, air acrobatics in the sky. You have people, we have concerts. Country music artists are here every night playing in different venues. It's just such a fun party. I could talk for hours about all the fun stuff and probably some of the things I shouldn't talk about. Just like when you go to Vegas, right? So, but it's a great event.
Some things need to stay where they happen, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me a little bit. I used to live in Munich for 12 years, and whenever Oktoberfest came to town, you basically had two types of people, right? You had the ones that just left the city and
Yes.
were gone for 3 weeks, and then you had, the others that were dressed up in lederhosen and dirndls and were celebrating. So that sounds quite similar.
Yeah.
Of course, that's not the only thing we want to talk about, today. So to kick things off, I'd be curious, can you walk us through your journey into PQC and how you're helping companies adopt these critical technologies in the face of not just the emerging quantum threat, but also obviously we have a lot of maturing regulatory requirements as well.
Yeah, we do. So I lead the device trust product team here at DigiCert, and we build solutions just to help help OEMs secure their connected products, everything from connected medical devices to connected consumer products. A couple of years ago, after joining DigiCert from Microsoft, we started hearing, or at least I started hearing a lot about, hey, we are hearing about post-quantum and that, quantum computers are potentially going to break, the classical asymmetrical algorithms. And I'm hearing this from our OEM customers. And I'm not a cryptographer or a mathematician by any stretch, right? But it became a recurring conversation with our customers. And so we started investing in understanding the problem space a bit more, what our customer concerns were around this, and then obviously what the regulators, NIST, many others were doing at the same time. And we could see this was going to be a big deal for our OEMs because they have product like physical devices deployed in hospitals, elevators, airplane. Like it's going to take years to potentially update these. And many of these are still like updated by SneakerNet. So we and our device trust product team, we started investing in these capabilities, adding the new algorithms, etc. And then I was tapped on the shoulder to kind of look after all our portfolios and our PQC readiness across the DigiCert product portfolio. And so now I've been talking to banks, healthcare providers, insurance companies, defense, of course, consumer device OEMs, medical device OEMs. And depending who you talk to, I mean, they're either really panicky now, so they're past the stages of grieving. They're on full-on acceptance that this is a thing. And then other industries, they're still full-on in denial. They're like, "What is this? Do I even have to care?" And so, depending on the industry and how regulated typically they are, like banks are all over this, right? Consumer device companies, not so much.
Right.
So it's interesting.
And I think in particular, since you call out banks and financial services institutions, right? I mean, they're just being used to being so regulated that as soon as the regulations are in place, they're like, okay, yeah, no, we have to do that.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So quantum threat is one thing, but if once the regulatory side is there, then of course it becomes a different conversation.
Yeah.
Quickly, right. So it sounds like for quite some time. I mean, it sounded you were talking about the past several years that you've been actively involved in advising customers, of all different verticals in how they can get started or prepare for an eventual PQC adoption. So I think the longest journey starts with a first step. So what is a typical first step that you recommend organizations take in beginning their transition, their journey towards PQC? And again, likely different in IoT and device trust versus some of the other sectors, right? So,
Yeah, in some organizations, it's really actually about giving our customers the data, the talk track, the PowerPoints, the material that they can use to talk about this internally in their enterprises. Again, some customers totally oblivious that this is coming. So, the cybersecurity teams in certain industries, they need to tell their leadership this story and this problem, that this is almost like a Y2K level event. And so they need to be empowered to actually go and sell upwards and get budget and get leadership sponsorship behind this, right? So almost that's like a step zero in a lot of cases. And so we've been building materials, our lab site, all that sort of stuff to kind of help our customers sell these projects and get stakeholder adoption internally because the blanket unawareness in a lot of verticals.
So a lot of educational effort that goes into that, right?
Yeah. So we do talks around at different conferences, the PKI conference that happens twice a year. We do our trust. So tons of education. So think of that as step zero. For customers that are already fully aware, they know this is happening. Now it's like, okay, I need to game up a plan and start executing. To your question, what is step zero? And step one, I should say now. Step one is really around, and the industry is using this term discovery. So discovery of your crypto assets, right? So if discovery of your TLS versions that you're using in your software and hardware in your enterprise. So if you're a bank, for example, and you've got a whole bunch of third-party applications or hardware firewalls, guess what? These new algorithms only run on TLS version 1.3. So even the discovery of your TLS versions that your third-party hardware and software vendors are using, and then having a conversation with them and saying, hey, what's your readiness? What's your timeline to add support for the new algorithms? And then discovery also means if you're writing your own software, is looking at the crypto libraries and SDKs you're using in your own software. Crypto bills of material and tools that generate those will often help in that. But really, it's about talking to your own developers, looking at your own source code, scanning that, and seeing where you might be using RSA or elliptical curve in your own source code, and gaming up a plan and a project potentially in your company to upgrade those apps.
So it's really a twofold journey. It's finding out internally, like an inward look. It's like, what are we using? How are we using it? And I mean, you specifically call out TLS as sort of one area to focus on. Now, I wonder why that is, why the focus on TLS.
Yeah, so that's caught everyone a little bit off guard. So the IETF has put out a statement effectively saying, and they literally use the words "put bluntly," we will not be supporting any of the PQC algorithms or quantum safe algorithms in anything less than TLS 1.3. And unfortunately, there's still lots of hardware, software, cloud PaaS services and SaaS services that only support up to TLS 1.2. So there's a prerequisite step, and it's something that companies can do today, is to start talking to their vendors, their cloud partners, internal app teams that have written their own apps, and get their TLS versions updated amongst their software and hardware they're using. So they can do that today, regardless of the algorithms and the status of the different algorithms and CAB forum and all the other stuff that goes around it, right? So it's a real practical step they can do right now.
Without even thinking about post-quantum anything.
Exactly.
Right?
Forget about PQC for a minute.
Right.
Get yourselves up to TLS 1.3. Talk to your partners, your software, your OEMs. Talk to them. Get their plan to do it. And you may have to educate them. That's the other thing that we've learned, is that when enterprises are now talking to their third-party software providers, often they don't even know what to ask and know what to answer. Like, there's a whole education piece. And in fact, I just got, which I was really pleased about, I just got my first kind of form questionnaire to my team from a third party that we use and that uses us. And they were asking us for our PQC timelines for TLS 1.3, which we already support, timelines for, all the algorithms. So this is the kind of Q&A you're going to have with your vendors, but your vendors may not know what you're talking about. So you may have to educate them first.
Right. So it's the education of the purchasing entity, exactly, what to put in their RFP, and then in turn it's sort of the supply chain also learning to say, oh, what is this, right? Oh yeah, we have that on the roadmap. It's going to be released, general availability at such and such date. So I guess we are at that point in preparing for that migration. It sounds like.
Yeah.
Now, besides TLS, I think a lot of talk also is around the challenges that are particularly related to the hybrid cryptography model. I think that's being tossed around a lot in combination with TLS, but also separate from it. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on the particular challenges you see with hybrid. Again, I'm envisioning it's a different challenge in an IoT embedded device kind of environment versus a general IT environment.
In some cases, you're absolutely right. So, but it's important to disambiguate the word hybrid. So it's used in two often confusing ways. So when people ask about hybrid, I right away ask them, what kind of hybrid are we talking about? Hybrid key exchange or hybrid certificates? Because they're quite different. So you want to disambiguate that hybrid key exchange, or the combination of, let's say, an algorithm like ML-Chem with a classical like RSA. That is happening now. And that is what a lot of enterprises are moving forward with right now and updating their TLS and their crypto SDKs to support hybrid key exchange to replace, so that TLS handshake, the first few packets, client hello, server hello, etc., they're basically negotiating a shared key. And that's a Diffie-Hellman classical way of doing it. And what we're replacing that with is ML-Chem with a classical algorithm next to it, right? So that's hybrid key exchange. The standards are pretty much done. You can start going forward with that today. Enterprises can start implementing that. Cloudflare, we have Google Chrome has it support. So a lot of apps now have support for hybrid key exchange. So if you can move forward with that, great. That'll prevent the harvest now and decrypt later. The second term, hybrid, is around hybrid X509 certificates. again, it's a combination of quantum safe algorithm like MLDSA with a classical like RSA. And there's a lot of debate on whether this is needed or not. Different regulators are favoring hybrids like BSI in Germany, ANSYS, etc. NIST maybe has been a bit more pro, just go straight to a pure digitally signed certificate with, say, MLDSA. And it all comes back to like, how much do we trust these new quantum safe algorithms yet? They haven't really been battle tested in theory. So, and the other problem with hybrid certificates, besides having to potentially do a two-step migration hybrid and then eventually 5 or 10 years down the road go pure MLDSA, is that the standards, there's 3 kind of competing hybrid certificate standards. And so the most popular one is known as a composite, but the standards aren't baked around this. There's also Chimera and Chameleon. So there's no firm standards around the 3 variations of hybrid certificates yet. So that's kind of paralyzing the hybrid momentum, so to speak, right now.
On the hybrid certificate side.
Correct.
Yeah. So until such a time when there is agreement and one or the other, or maybe 2 of them will get chosen, and that is going to be an issue that is much easier to address or solve even. Now, with hybrid, you pointed out there are regional variations with different geographies, building more on hybrid, and others are more pushing towards a full-on PQC. Then there's also even different algorithms that are sometimes, being mentioned in different geographies, like the use of ProtoChem or classic McLeese.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how does that impact sort of a global interoperability standard approach to PQC?
Yeah, it's complicating things. So, classic. I'm glad you brought up classic McLeese because it didn't get selected in the latest NIST selection round. But it's definitely preferred by some of the other regulators. BSI is a big fan of classic McLeese. There's pros and cons to all these algorithms: performance, speed, memory, things like that, compute time. But point is, I think, unfortunately, there's going to be some fragmentation out there. So if you're shipping software, you may have to, let's say, like DigiCert, like we ship an SDK called TrustCore. It's a crypto SDK. And in this SDK, we will likely have to support, many of the algorithms, right? So today we just support RSA and elliptical or curve, 1 or 2 others. But in the future, it might be Sphinx Plus or SLH DSA, MLDSA, FNDSA, aka Falcon, classic McLeese, ProtoChem. Like, it gets hard for software vendors, if we have to support, 6 or 7 different variations of quantum safe algorithms. And then for enterprises, they'll have to look at picking one that is common amongst the jurisdictions and the geographies they ship their software into. So if they're building software that they would sell to the defense industry in the US and the defense industry in, say, Germany, they would have to look for the common denominator, and it might not be a match, right? So CNSA 2.0 standards in the US will dictate largely what crypto is supported in the US, and that may differ from what, the Germans or the French and other jurisdictions might want.
So just slightly different versions or variants of software packages that will be, geographically relevant there.
That's right. It's like the old days where you had a crypto and then you had the export edition of a crypto, which was dumbed down for, countries that, shouldn't have strong crypto, right? It's a similar way where we're shipping packages with different crypto based on the jurisdiction and geography.
Yeah. Now, one of the algorithms you just mentioned was FNDSA or Falcon. Can you give us a quick update on where we stand with Falcon and what its role even is in that whole migration process?
Yeah, so Falcon, um, we are cautiously optimistic that NIST, so it's one of the FIPS, the NIST approved algorithms. Exactly, but it doesn't have the FIPS standard. It's not a standard version yet, so it's in early draft. We hope to see the IPD, the kind of the public draft of it, by end of this summer, and that will kick off like a 90-day comment period. I think it's 90 days. And then NIST will go back and work internally, and then they'll take the comments and they'll adopt some of the things that were suggested, right? So we probably won't see a FIPS version of Falcon or FNDSA probably till mid next year. And so that's kind of the timeline around Falcon. There is some benefits of Falcon that may be appealing to certain industries. So yeah. So, one of the challenges with, Spinix Plus or MLDSA is the signature and key sizes are really large, 3 to 4 or 5 times larger than, RSA equivalents, even though they're faster performance wise. So for small, again, going back to my happy place, which is IoT, these really small, resource constrained devices, they won't be able to fit some of these new certificates on them, right? And which may require product lines to be retired. Falcon or FNDSA, the private key, public key, and signature size is actually not that big relative to MLDSA. So there might be opportunities there for FNDSA, and so we're looking to support it when the standard is finalized.
Right, and of course, in a resource constrained environment, we're mostly talking about verification. So that it's not the small device needing to generate those keys or key pairs, right? It's the verification operation that then
exactly
then ideally can be run in much less memory than some of the larger keys.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, of course, in all of this discussion, we're also oftentimes talk about timelines, right? And the various, you mentioned CNSA 2.0. There's a timeline in there.
Right.
I believe over the past few weeks, Canada just announced a timeline. European Union came out with a quite some call it optimistic. Others call it unrealistic. Where do you stand in this? What do you think when you look at the timelines and all the things we talked about, vendor readiness, even the consumer readiness? What's your take on those timelines?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be certain verticals and use cases where we won't be able to hit those timelines of 2030 and 2035, just because of the logistics, the cost, everything around it, right? The regression testing, the lack of sometimes the standards we need to move forward with. IETF is still doing some stuff. NIST is still working on things. So when you put it all together, 5 years, well, less than 5 years now, 4.5. I mean,
we're in mid-July, right?
Exactly. So European Commission, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, they want all critical assets done by 2030. That's pretty aggressive. And critical assets are definitely the most complicated. I mean, think about your SCADA systems that are powering nuclear facilities and things like that. This is old hardware and software and oh my gosh,
the whole bulk power generation distribution system.
Really antiquated often, right? And so to bring that up to spec is going to be a tremendous effort. So that'll be really challenging. Other industries, it won't be as hard, but still a lot of work in front of everyone. And then you saw, very similar timelines. I was just in Australia and they had released in the spring, very similar timelines. UK did the same, as you mentioned, Canada, where we are. NIST obviously had their timelines published already last year, 2030 and 2035. CNSA has their timelines. And in fact, by 2027, I believe, all procurement to any of the three-letter agencies in the US has to support, the RFPs will require you to support all the new algorithms and standards.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's very close by as well, right? That's it's 1.5, 2 years out in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, we've been talking about sort of the overlapping timelines of, organizations being ready with their own migration program, but then also, the vendor readiness is sort of the underlying, right?
Yeah.
Talking to you and, the experience that you shared with some of your, partners that you procure from, it sounds like we're doing okay on that vendor timeline, like actual, solutions being available that would support those new algorithms. Is that a fair observation there?
So I would say probably the crypto SDKs are the furthest ahead. So you saw OpenSSL 3.5 support it recently. The new algorithms, some of them anyway. Open Quantum Safe, OQS, DigiCert. We have our TrustCore SDK, and those are fully in there. And then we see HSM vendors that have to, implement these as well and get the associated FIPS 140-3 certification. They're all in doing it now. Now, where it gets interesting is when you think about enterprise apps, like let's say SAP. Let's say you had an 8 or 9-year-old SAP environment that's still running TLS 1.2. Of course, doesn't have any support for these new algorithms. I'm just making this as an example, but and you haven't done any upgrades or application upgrades on it for a while. You're still running, older versions of Windows and VMware. That's where it's going to get painful. It's going to kick off a lot of enterprise application updates and infrastructure updates. So this is where I think the vendors will lag behind, and you will be challenged just in the upgrade logistics. Like think about just an SAP upgrade. They're usually huge projects, right? Or any ERP. I mean, so it's a challenge.
Yeah. And 5 years is not a lot of time by any stretch if you think about technology updates and in those type of large scale migrations, nonetheless, right? Now I want to go back to I think you brought up IETF twice now, and ask again on what are the other sort of areas that we're waiting on regulations or standards to really catch up and close that gap.
Yeah, so the IETF, there are some still standards that are in late draft form relative to OIDs, setting OIDs, object IDs, and certificates and things like that. They're like an identifier that sits inside TLS and inside certificates. So these OIDs are there as identifiers for specific algorithm and help computers figure out what algorithms they're supporting, etc. Right. So that was those are largely done. There's working groups in that are thinking about PQC from a DNS sec perspective. And then there's, some others. And then there's, of course, the CAB forum, which governs the public internet, nothing to do with IETF, but they are kind of waiting for the IETF to kind of finish their standards work. And then CAB forum is now kicking off their piece of it in terms of, when to require new roots and the root stores and trust stores being updated with certificates that are signed with the new algorithms. So yeah, lots of things still to do.
Right. So really a cascading set of standards that need to fall into place.
Yeah.
So
kind of the top order bit was NIST approving, and getting FIPS, getting the algorithm standardized, then IETF, and now CAB forum, and then all sorts of regulations are being updated. Like the CNSA Matter standard is now got a working group inside for PQC adoption inside that standard. You'll see regulations like the EU Cyber Resilience Act. You'll see all of these regulations and standards will have some sort of requirement in the next few years for adoption of these new algorithms.
So if you were to compare a conversation with either an existing customer or potential customer say, that you had last year in April, May, to a conversation that you have, this year in April, May? Has that changed at all? Is that, do you feel any sense? You said it earlier, there's more of a sense of urgency now, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's the topic of quantum preparedness is becoming more prevalent. There's more education being done by everyone in the ecosystem. It's a team sport to educate everyone, right? So the good news is, you put up your hand and you ask an audience, hey, how many of you heard of PQC or MLDSA? And now you'll see a quarter, 30-40% put up their hand, but we're far from the 100% where we need to be. So I think that's kind of where 2025 is, to kind of get that from 30% to 80-90%. That's kind of what I would love to see at Christmas, is that kind of uptake and awareness of the problem.
There's your Christmas wish. That's nice.
Exactly.
Yeah, you said it. So for any CISO or otherwise IT decision maker who's listening to us speak about this today, what would you say, Kevin, is like that? If you have one piece of advice that you could give to help them, take that initial step, what would it be?
Yeah, I would say, go through what I just mentioned, do some discovery of your crypto assets, get TLS versions updated. You can do that today. Talk to your vendors about this, get their plans, and get your discovery going, and get your awareness going in your organization. Again, this is going to be a big problem, and you don't want to be caught flat-footed in 2028 or 2029, and heaven forbid that, something happens and a quantum computer shows up, and then it's a real problem, right? Right now, we're just preparing for something that could happen, but, the probability is high. I was at RSA this spring, and one of the preeminent thought leaders on it, they said, someone in the audience asked them, what's your probability you would put this happening in 5 or 10 years? And he said he put the probability at 5% in 5 years and going higher, way higher in 10 years. Yeah. And so if someone told you, hey, you have a 5 or 10% chance of having cancer in the next 5 years, would you change your lifestyle? You probably would. Right. So it's time for us to change our lifestyle and get going here. So
change our digital lifestyle. That's fantastic. Kevin, if some of our listeners want to dive a bit deeper, where can they, what's a good place for information that you can point them to?
Yeah, just come to the DigiCert website. We've got a PQC landing page. We have also got a labs site off of that, which we're just updating, where we put more of the experimental algorithms in there. So we have Falcon, for example, in there, even though it's not near a standard yet. But so come there. We've got lots of resources. We have information to help arm you and help you educate your enterprise colleagues, right? And you can reach out to us, and we're happy to chat more.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kevin, for sharing your experience, and appreciate your time. And
thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, thanks for listening. Be sure to follow us on your preferred podcast platform, like and share the episode. Don't be afraid to provide any feedback. We'll be sure to respond to that as well. Thank you. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks.
The quantum era is already here. With the right tools, the right knowledge, and the right mindset, together we can face it head on. To find out more about PQ Shield and how our cutting-edge solutions can help you secure your data against the quantum threat, visit pqshield.com. Make sure to search for Shielded, the last line of cyber defense, in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. Don't forget to click subscribe so you never miss an episode. On behalf of the team here at PQ Shield, thanks for listening.